All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar discussion on how quality AI-powered CTV campaigns elevate for performance across the entire marketing ecosystem and how CTV drives demand generation activity across all digital touchpoints. Following this discussion, we'll have some time for Q&A, so please take advantage of that. You don't have to wait until the end to submit your questions. You can add them at any point during the session by clicking the Q&A icon on the Zoom platform. When you submit a question, please include your name and email so our panelists can reach out to you if they're unable to get to your question during the session. And everyone registered will also get a recording of this webinar in their inbox tomorrow, should you miss anything or want to revisit any part of the conversation. All right, so today's guests are Michael Bilo and Rebecca Miller. Michael is TV Scientific's VP of Data Science and Machine Learning. Michael is an engineering executive focused on machine learning, AI, and data science with extensive experience in strategic development, leadership, and innovation. He has excelled across technology-driven industries with a focus in ad tech, guiding organizations through transformations, growth initiatives, and operational excellence. Michael is known for leveraging data-driven insights and cross-functional collaboration to lead data science, ML engineering, bidding infrastructure, analytics, and AI functions. And he is also lost on Jeopardy twice. And Rebecca leads corporate marketing at TV Scientific, overseeing brand, content, and communication strategy. She develops programs to educate growth and performance marketers on driving measurable outcomes through performance TV. Prior to joining TV Scientific, Rebecca held marketing roles at Splash and Paylocity with a focus on brand marketing and corporate communications. And with that, I'll pass things over to Michael and Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Julia, for having us and for that amazing introduction. And thanks to everyone joining us here today. We are really excited to dig into a topic that's top of mind for every growth and performance marketer right now, and that's how AI is really changing the way people discover brands and why CTV is a channel that can help marketers really break through all the other noise and drive measurable outcomes. We're seeing really big shifts today in consumer behavior, especially among younger audiences who are just really skipping traditional search. They're looking for answers anywhere they don't have to click, and understanding how CTV fits into this is really important. So today I am putting Michael in the hot seat, and we're going to cover a few areas. Why CTV is becoming a core part of marketing strategies today, how AI can amplify the impact of these campaigns, and then the cross-channel lift that marketers can see when CTV is really done right. So I want to start with a quick current state to kind of set the stage. Um, I think about how many years the path to discovering a brand was like so straightforward, right? People searched on Google, clicked on links, got to a website, at some point converted. It was super linear, measurable, predictable. But that's changing and it feels like it's changing really fast. Social feeds, streaming content, AI search results, these are all things that don't require a click at all. And this is just how a lot of people today are finding brands. So, Bilo, I want your take on all of this. How do you see consumers discovering brands today? And what do you think is really behind this shift?
So thanks, Rebecca. I think you're right, or I think that's pretty clear that AI search, whether it's done through, ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever or even just like through Google's AI search, are changing the way that people find brands, and are changing some of the dynamics of influence, which I think is important to think about for marketing. So I think, the change is really important. I think it's actually quite a positive change. Um, from the perspective of getting to the core of like the question of advertising, which is what actually drives a person to, to check out your brand or to either become interested or to think about making a purchase or to actually go through with making a purchase. Um, you talked a bit about the chain of, discovery in the past and like the use of search and social there. And I think that's a narrative we've taken for granted for, the last 20 years. And the reason I think we like that narrative working in digital advertising is that it's very simple. It's very straightforward. And I think we are getting to a world where um, when we talk about effective advertising, we're talking about effective influence. And it is a harder quantity to measure, but it's actually the thing that works rather than like, hey, somebody typed in, Nike Air Max 270, 270s near me and size 9.5. And then they clicked on the first Google link. Like that intent was built somewhere else, right? But up until this point, I would say the search and social giants have taken a lot of credit for that last click, that spark right before activation, whereas I think what was really happening is like all the other sets of influences, whether it was a social feed or whether it was a TV ad or whether it was something you heard from a friend, right? That actually drove either the awareness or something down funnel.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming a lot less linear than it used to be, which is really interesting. I think, and in the title of this webinar too, we have like the term zero click, right? I think
Sure,
one of this is a bigger shift that we're seeing, which is exactly what it sounds like, right? Like consumers get the information they need without ever having to click through to a website.
for sure,
Like I even think about today, um, I might go to Google to ask a question. If I do, I'm probably going to look at the AI overview. If I
sure,
go, but I'm more likely these days to go to ChatGPT to ask the same question because it's like I don't have to sort through everything that Google's going to give back to me.
for
Um,
sure.
I saw an interesting stat recently from SparkToro, which said that 60% of searches now produce zero clicks. And that's like 60% is a lot, right? I think for
Sure.
marketers, this means that traditional, like those click-based metrics that we talk about aren't really capturing the full picture, which I think is what you're alluding to. And that people are really engaging with brands and making decisions without those clicks. So, um,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
and I think like one of the things that you said earlier is actually something I disagree with. Like I think it is not I don't totally agree with like the this like value of the click that has been. This is part of the reason that I work at TV Scientific is because I think my academic background is in a field called causality, and I am really interested in where levers actually are, and I think we have this is to me, this is maybe a hot take, but
I
a
love a
narrative
hot
we've been
take.
sold, the narrative of like click-through rate being like a really fantastic, like being a really fantastic metric, is one that like Google and Bing and Yahoo and Lycos or whatever, like really have wanted us to believe for 25, 30 years at this point.
Mm.
And like actually we are starting to get to the like the actual thing that is convincing somebody to either investigate something further or to make a purchase. And I think this is something that has been true for 30 years. It is just now that like the monopoly on search is starting to get broken a little bit, or with we're starting to break through, that it is becoming, I don't like that change. I think is going to be a big mindset shift for everybody who works in advertising, and I think and I think it is really better for like the entire ecosystem, minus Google. So that's a my personal hot take, and kind of why I work in CTV advertising, because I think you have something that is big, like big, viewable, unskippable, um, premium content. It's kind of a place that I don't know, like I was raised on linear TV, like I expect ads when I watch TV or sports or whatever. And that's where like that's what I see as the like not just it is a selling point of CTV, but it is also something that we are going to see more of as we talk about zero click more and more is like, hey, this ad that like ran for 30 seconds on somebody's 70-inch TV at home was much more influential than like the social ad that like sort of that they just sort of flew by. And I think that's where I'm, let's say, excited about the potential for CTV,
Yeah,
and like
totally.
the fact of it today.
Yeah, for sure. You were reading my mind, or we didn't really connect too much before this webinar, so I really do think you're reading my mind on this. Um, I think all of that kind of brings us to this important point, which we're getting to, which is like we need channels that are both measurable and
Sure.
offer this deeper, more intentional connection with the consumer, which of course, like you've been talking about, we all know the channel we're talking about today is CTV. I want to share a couple stats from our upcoming State of Performance TV report to kind of set the stage a little bit more for what we want to talk about next, which is more of like this role of CTV in the era of zero click search, and then get your take on that. So, we recently ran a survey to over 600 marketers to learn about how they were approaching advertising in general, as well as with CTV for 2026. And CTV and social media actually tied as the number one most effective
Hmm.
channel for marketers.
Yep.
And what's also interesting and tied to that is that CTV this year, or moving into 2026, will be the number one channel for spend, with social just behind it. And I think, to me, this like really shows nothing groundbreaking, right? It shows that when people see a channel working and actually driving outcomes for their brands, they're
Sure.
willing to invest more in it. Is it that people aren't spending on search or aren't spending on social or are spending less on these channels? No, not necessarily. It's just that people are investing more than they ever have before on CTV because they're seeing it work like just as much as or more as any other digital channel does. So I wanted to get your take on that and ask, like, why do you think CTV is becoming more effective for marketers? And you kind of talked a little bit about it
Sure.
as we moved into this question. But is it that we're getting more in tune with how to use it as a performance channel? Is the tech more advanced? Like, I'm sure it's a mix of all this, but like, what do you think is
Yeah.
behind that?
So I think there's a couple of key things. One is that CPMs on search and social have risen a lot. And I think you've got to think about, or what I think about when I think about, a marketing mix. If I were whatever running data science at a big brand and wanted to think about how do I want to think about how do I distribute my next dollar, right? It's not like uh, uh, you might spend, 80% of your budget on search and social. Um, and like in order to like learn the effectiveness of CTV, you can test with, you are able to test it with budgets that are, I think, budgets that are reasonable. Not You don't have to go and, run $100,000 like geo test. You totally can if you want to, and like you want to see it at that precision. But I think the promise of CTV is like a much more engaging ad, right? With the same sorts of audience targeting, geo targeting levers that you have working in search and social. Um, and I think the measurement has become a lot more advanced. I think also people who, grew up, started their marketing careers in the digitally native era are getting like, higher and higher up in just in organizations more broadly. I think people are savvier when it comes to incrementality, and I think this is something that like the search and social providers are starting to really kind of not be able to show. And I think that is what is driving people to look outside of like those two, known players to go out and like say, okay, well, how do I really reach my audience? Or like I know that like there's a big overlap between like between Real Housewives watchers and folks who are interested in buying my product. Like, why don't I just advertise in like literally in the Real Housewives or in competition reality or or during live sports? Like um these are things that like people know, people know and people do actually want to watch. And I think the buying process has become a lot easier in CTV to the point where I think it rivals search and social. And I think the measurement has improved so much on CTV, and I would say for like zero click stuff in general. And in particular, the measurement of incrementality is really starting to tell, in my opinion, a pretty bad story about search and social. And I think that's leading people to look for like what is the next channel? Where's my next dollar going to be the most effective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned measurement a few times. I think with measurement and optimization too evolving so much, TV as a channel itself feels a lot more accessible to people, just generally. You also mentioned cost in there earlier. I think one thing we still hear is concern around cost. I
Sure,
think for a lot of years, right, TV advertising was seen as only for the big brands, the household names who could afford to buy
sure,
Super Bowl or Oscars inventory. Um, and we have a stat from our State of Performance TV survey as well. When we asked marketers why they didn't invest in CTV over the past year, the number one reason was the perception that it's still really expensive.
sure.
So I'm curious your thoughts on obviously the question how expensive is CTV really is it's a very big question, but how can
No,
marketers make the most of their investment in it?
yeah, and I would say CPMs obviously matter, right? And to say you're going to go from, whatever, like a $2 search keyword to a, $10 or, $10, let's say fast channel, you probably would pay something like $20 CPM on like a more premium channel like Hulu. And certainly like there are also, I would say like the really high, like, $80 CPMs for like super premium live sports NBA finals, stuff like that, Super Bowl. So there's definitely like you are definitely going to impress, impress either fewer people or deliver a lower frequency. I do think one of the metrics that I do have in my head about this, or that I think is interesting and nobody really talks about, is cost per second of advertising. And I think if you look at like the cost per like unit time of advertising that you're delivering, actually CTV is quite competitive. But that's again a personal hot take and not an industry standard thing. It is something that I look at a lot, or I'm very interested in, because I do think there is some relationship between the length of an ad and its memorability, and its ability to drive value for your brand. But that is still a research topic for me and for my team. So like what I will say is that there's no question that most of your CPMs are going to be higher. That said, like if you are if you are a super premium search keyword like your a car brand or something like that, like actually there are a lot of fast channels that there are like plenty of fast channels that have single digit dollar CPMs. And but even leaving all the cost aside, like from my perspective, that's not what matters. What matters is incrementality. And like you could be paying, if $100 CPM inventory works for you, like you are able to drive a better ROAS with that than you are with like $2 CPM inventory. It doesn't matter that you can get like 50x the total number of impressions off of that $2 inventory.
Or
And I think that is a, I think that's tough. Like, I think that is tough for people to I don't want to say like let go of. Like I totally understand it and it feels a lot more risky. Um, but I think the real risk is like just is not really forcing yourself to look deep into incrementality, and I think that's where CTV shines.
Yeah. I think all this really just ties into why the momentum around CTV keeps building. Um, and also, once brands realize just how efficient the channel is and how precise they can make it, you talked about like targeting someone, you know, who is watching Real Housewives or live sports or whatever, like
Sure,
just how precise you can get it, especially with the right tools who can like that can like continuously optimize those campaigns and those audiences. People are seeing it more or less as an experiment and more as a core part of their mix. Um, Emily, our
yeah,
VP of marketing, and I went to an event last week where she interviewed a couple of our customers for a panel on stage. And it was just really cool hearing about how they moved from CTV really being more of this experiment, like I said, to a critical part of their marketing strategy and to see them
yeah,
get so excited about, you expect TV to be this brand builder, which it is, don't get me wrong, but then you get these down funnel results as well that you maybe didn't expect. So it was just really cool to see so many people last week excited about CTV.
for sure.
Um, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this already, but like, is there a particular reason why you think marketers are so excited about CTV as a channel, or like, what does it offer? I know you mentioned incrementality,
Sure.
that other channels maybe can't.
Yeah. So I think it's a couple of things. I think like again, I come back to the question of like where is my next dollar most efficiently spent? And I think like, you know, that is I think always the question that, a CMO, a head of growth or whatever should be asking themselves and should be, talking to their CFO and CEO about. Um, and I think that is like that's sort of where I start. The other things is that you are always always have the ability to be in premium content, right? You have like TV shows that people actually want to watch versus whatever is coming through like all the user generated content. And now like let's say on the negative side of AI, like the sort of AI slop that is starting to show up on the like especially in social.
Mhm.
um
And you've just
you
got people
also,
like doom scrolling all day. You know what I mean?
for sure,
Like,
for sure. Yeah, and the like the social providers, right? They're selling their O&O inventory, right? Facebook is not, Facebook has their own ad sales team on Instagram that is like, for them, delivering ads is essentially free. For us, it's not, right? We are paying NBC or we're paying, Universal or Warner Brothers or whatever, like for the right to show stuff in their content, and like it is a like we have to be like Facebook's goal is to keep you on their site, right? Is to keep you scrolling. Our goal is to drive outcomes. And so I think a good divert, like there is a Facebook I'm sure wants you like does want you to click on ads, and of course wants stuff to perform, but their main goal is to sort of continue to drive engagement with their tools with the hope of like continuing to make everybody, I don't know, live in Instagram or someday live in the metaverse or whatever it is. From my perspective, like like working in advertising, my job is to sell you some stuff. And like is to buy the most intelligent set of inventory and to use the best set of targeting to to actually make your ad inventory or like the ads that you want to drive valuable. And I think that let's say diversion in intent is or divergence in intent is important for or like I think it will become more and more important for marketers, especially as we start looking at incrementality with like a much more critical eye.
yeah. One thing you mentioned earlier in that was, around getting like leadership on board, I think.
Yeah,
Obviously the excitement around CTV has to translate internally too, especially when you're making the case for budget, because if
Yeah,
marketers are concerned about the cost, then like certainly your CFO and other leadership are going to
totally.
have that same perception.
Totally.
So if you had to explain CTV's role in performance marketing and customer acquisition to a
Sure.
skeptical CFO, how would you sell it?
For sure. What I would say is look at the incrementality of every single channel that you have and look at it with a really critical eye. One of the things, these are tools that I and my team developed at TV Scientific, are really focused a lot around incrementality. And I think if you don't know your iROAS, like that is the first place to start. And you've got to look across all of your channels and kind of take them and treat all of them with skepticism, like in the same way that like I would advocate that people treat CTV with the same level of skepticism. But like I want people to be broken from like, oh, there was like the last click. The last click is 100% of the credit. Like that is a thing that is eroding rapidly. And I'm actually very happy about that because I think that will start showing where influential channels higher upstream, let's say in marketing, actually have value.
Mhm.
So, like looking at the data that TV Scientific provides, number one, we provide like log level data, which means that you can see, like if you're running on a CPM basis, you can see every single ad that ran, how much we paid for it, like what, on what channel it ran, at what time of day, et cetera, et cetera. And that makes it very easy for you to go in and optimize your campaign yourself if that's the thing that you really want to do versus if you are on like Google PMax, like it can kind of end up wherever Google thinks it's the best for them, right? And they're going to try to hit your goal, but like they are trying to just hit your goal and like make as much money for Google as possible and fill as many bad ad slots on YouTube that Google wants to sell. They don't. They're not necessarily optimizing for you. Um, that transparency, I hope is something that your CFO, your CEO cares about. Second thing I think that's important, or like another thing I think that's important, um, is like how is CTV how does CTV actually work? Like, what's the mechanism? And we see a couple of things. One is we see a spike effect. So one of the nice things about measuring CTV is we look at when an ad is delivered, and we look at the same set of households before that ad was delivered. We look at the same set of households after the ad was delivered. And what we see in looking across all types of outcomes, whether that is like a very upper funnel outcome, like visiting a website, whether it is like a lead gen, add to cart, all the way down to a complete purchase. We see a big spike from the same households where ads were delivered before, looking after the ad was delivered in the, couple of minutes after an ad was delivered to before, right? That I think is to me like one of the, after I built that was one of the really happiest days because I could see exactly the jump in activity from CTV. And it happens all the way down to activation, but I think we think a lot about that and we measure that mostly at the let's say the interest level. Um, and then what we do, and then what we can look at is like for this CTV audience, this like group of people watching CTV that you're reaching with your ads. How do they perform relative to, how do the group that you reach with CTV look relative to basically like essentially like a comparable group. And that turned into our always on incrementality product. That's sort of the next place that I look, and that will give you your iROAS if you have dollar valued outcomes that you care about. Um, and then finally, like if you are like, and I would say always like I love this when working with clients is like to always have skepticism to go out and run either a geolift test or a PSA test if that's something. Now, obviously, there you are buying media that you are buying media that's turning into a PSA. I really strongly encourage folks to do it because that's able to make your ad spend much more visible on the bottom line. And if like you are working at a company that has that level of maturity, I like absolutely would encourage you to go all the way to, all the way to a PSA test, which is sort of your gold standard of statistical evidence.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm just cognizant of time, so I want to move on to AI because I have a couple questions that I definitely want to get to here. Um, I think, and like this ties into what you were just talking about, which is like TV has historically been like pretty hard to quantify and make scalable,
Sure.
right? I think part of obviously the tech is a piece of it, but within that tech, like AI is also a piece of what's making TV more measurable, more predictable, more repeatable. And we're seeing people take advantage of this like insane level of optimization that just has never existed before. And it's making their campaigns, like we've said before, efficient. They're able to justify their spend. So I want to talk about how AI is amplifying performance in CTV and what that really
Sure.
looks like in practice. So in our survey data, the impact of AI was the number two stressor among marketers going into next year. And to me, that's like the opposite of what we want it to do, right? Like AI, what AI should do is alleviate that stress, not add to it. So I'm curious to hear from you about how you're seeing AI improve the way that CTV campaigns are planned and optimized.
Sure. Um, so you have, I think, there are like a few AI levers that are becoming more valuable to marketers. You have optimization, just like line item level optimization I have a $500 daily budget and I want that $500 to be spent in the best possible way. There is more, just the ability to uh, run a campaign, view the performance of the campaign, and then feed that back directly into the system that is doing the bidding on on programmatic ad inventory and improve the set of things that that you want to buy versus you don't want to buy. That process, I think we should all be like everybody in here should be pretty optimistic about. I think it is a lever that like makes TV now that like the measurability of TV now feeds into our ability to say, oh, well, we measured it, and actually, like it would have been better had we, advertised on Pluto TV rather than Hulu. Great, fantastic. Now the AI model that is responsible for bidding knows that, right? Is going to decrease your mix on one channel and increase your mix on another. And that is a like that loop I think is really exciting, but it flows through measurement.
Yeah.
The next side of AI that I think is really interesting is in the what people might call like the agentic side of things, where media planning can be more easily automated using using signals from for example like a company website or a set of historical conversions, something like that. I think this is like relatively new. And I think it is something that has a lot of possibility to change the way that, the ad industry and media planning is done in general, but I think deserves a healthy amount of skepticism today in 2025, tomorrow in 2026. And even again, even out to the future, because when you start taking, let's say, more hands off the wheel, there are things where I think people should be really comfortable with taking their hands off the wheel, and I think that is line item level optimization. I think like really the way that our optimization technology at TV Scientific works, I really encourage folks to say like, let us find pockets of performance for you. When it comes to the setup of a campaign, I think I wouldn't, that's not a thing that I would turn over to Claude or ChatGPT today.
Mhm.
I think there's some promise with it. I think, looking at some of the ad CP work, I think it's interesting. But that's not a thing that I would necessarily take my hands off the wheel for today, because you really need to have a great ability to measure incrementality to actually determine, your like the performance that you're trying to drive. So there's something there. I think that is probably like one of the big stressors is like, is like media planning dead. And in my opinion, in 2025, 2026, it's not. And then like I think the last thing, which is quite interesting, is creative optimization. And like, is there, how good can you create a creative entirely from scratch, and have it perform on CTV? Can you take a creative that you have and create a variant of it that is going to be more effective? This is something that TV Scientific has been working on in sort of co-pilot mode for the last couple of months. I'm excited about when we actually talk about it like a lot more broadly. And I think there's some real promise there, right? There are things that we know about like TV Scientific like knows a lot about what makes TV advertising, what makes a TV advertising effective, and that's not just your audience, it's not just your audience, it's not just your targeting, it's not just the show that you're showing it on, it's the creative, right? If you have a crap creative, you're never going to sell anything, and I think that to me is an area that I'm really excited about seeing blossom over the next couple of years.
Yeah, totally. Great examples. I think kind of like switching gears a little bit. We talked kind of about earlier the differences between CTV and other digital channels and like the benefits of running CTV campaigns. I think it's important to note too, and then going back to this, that marketers rarely run channels in isolation, right?
Sure.
Um,
Yep.
the way all these channels work together is a really important piece to the impact of TV. So understanding that cross-channel impact is really important, especially for those who want to like optimize smarter, just get a more accurate look at what their true ROI is. So I wanted to talk for a minute before we move on about cross-channel impact and kind of
Sure.
getting your take on how you think CTV campaigns impact other channels like search and social. Um,
Definitely.
and yeah, just wherever you
And
want to go
this
from
is
there.
a this is one of the other big things, especially when we talk to larger advertisers who have like a really big who have a mature media mix, is we look at the impact of CTV on like what happens for somebody who's previously been exposed to CTV. Like, does that increase their likelihood of converting via social? And that's something that we are able to answer, basically in the affirmative, by we see the last click channel, for example, from like a pixel on a website. And that gives us an idea of like, okay, this person's last click was on Google, but they were impressed on CTV 5 times. And looking at the response effect from, as you increase the frequency of the CTV the frequency of the CTV campaign that you're running, like, are people more likely to convert via some other last click channel, whether it's search or social or TikTok or whatever. That's a thing. That's an effect that we see really, really clearly, and that I think is very exciting to be able to say with a lot of confidence that CTV improves the effectiveness of your search and social campaigns. Like, you will see better returns from your CTV audience via search and via social than you will from your search and social audiences alone. And we measure that through some reporting we call it the halo effect, that yeah, we provide to our brands.
Cool. Okay. Again, looking at time, I want to switch gears and look ahead now. Obviously, things change so fast in marketing. We all know this. So doing any sort of like future look feels a little daunting in a way, but we are going to go there anyway. Um, as we think about the next like 12 to 18 months, um, you know, AI, even though it feels like it's advancing like crazy, and it is, it's
Sure.
still like very much in its infancy, right? There's so much room for it to become more and more innovative. Also, consumer behaviors are changing. The way we measure impact is only going to get more sophisticated. So, I guess my just overall question for you is what do you think the future of AI and CTV look like in the next 12 to 18 months, say?
Um, so I think and I hate to bang the same drum at the same time or like all the time, but it is about incrementality, right? It is about like here's my CTV audience, like and here's the a comparable audience where I'm showing a PSA, and just compare the performance of those of those two groups. And that's really where you're going to be able to see the impact of CTV mediated by all the other channels, all the other marketing channels that there are out there, whether it's search, social, AI search, like AI assistants, whatever it is that people are using or discovering to like get to that last click. Um, uh measure the difference in the performance of a CTV a group that you've advertised to CTV and a group that it showed PSAs to or like a comparable group via like a it's or some other comparable group and that's the key and I think the the search and social channels have for 20 years given us an illusion of control via last click. And that's a thing that I think we're going to have to go inside of our hearts and let go. Like we're going to say, this conversion happened, and 20% of the credit of it is due to, 20% of that incremental credit is due to CTV. And I think today we're really obsessed with like this outcome was 100% driven by 100% driven by search or 100% driven by social or even 100% driven by CTV. And I think we are doing ourselves a disservice in with that kind of thinking. And in the future, as like people get more of their information from AI search engines or from AI tools, um just the like being really firm and measuring your incrementality, measuring your performance is going to be like that's the way that you're going to get the most out of your marketing spend. And I being the data scientist that I am, it's like the thing that I really want to impress on people the most.
Yeah. It's like the age-old marketing debate of like sourced versus influenced
Yeah.
pipeline and revenue. It's like, what is it really? Like, is it really
But
100%?
that like
I
and
mean,
that's literally like my academic interest. Like
yeah.
it's like my academic interest is the reason I work here, right? Or it's like one of the main reasons that I work here. Other than like great fantastic coworkers like like you and Emily and our CEO. Like there are you actually can quantify that effect. Like you can quantify the effect of sourced versus I'm sorry, I forgot the
Influenced.
alternative to
Yeah, yeah.
sourced versus influenced, right? Quantifying that effect is so important. And and today, I, I see stuff like this in exact meetings at TV Scientific of you see both numbers and you're like, great, now I have like double I have double the total leads which of these actually mattered. And I
Exactly.
think going into causal methods and methods surrounding incrementality, where we're going to give up a little bit of certainty about this exact outcome was 100% driven by any one channel, and get to a more like this media mix is way more incremental than this other media mix. And if we're able to do that, I think we are going to be able to see for ourselves the impact of like influential channels like TV rather than like really, let's say like end of the funnel activate channels like search and social.
Hmm. Okay. One more question before we get into Q&A. I want one piece of advice that you would give marketers who are looking to get started with TV advertising or are in super early stages one piece
Sure.
of advice for them, and then I'll give mine after you.
I think the most important thing with folks who are early in their journey is to pick good measurable outcomes. And if you have some notion of, let's say, like a customer acquisition cost, um, try to make that explicit for yourself. Because if you can make your, if you can make your incremental CAC lower than your LTV, like you can grow your business really fast with any channel, right? This is sort of regardless of whether you're doing CTV or anything. Um, but that is, I think that's like such a good place to start and to orient yourself around is like have good financial metrics for what success looks like for you, and make sure that your website or your app or whatever it is really measurable to the goal that you want. And I think if you're able to do that, you're going to be able to make TV perform for you.
Yeah. My piece of advice is more around like the brand marketing side, I guess, or the creative. I think the creative part can so easily be underthought and overthought. It's like so much easier today to get a decent 30-second spot created using like stock video and even AI. We talked about that a little bit.
Hmm.
Whereas like just a few years ago, it was like you had to have a whole produced setup
For
for
sure.
something quality. However, I think the ease of production today almost in a way creates this like false sense of security. And at the same time, it can really lead marketers to overthink too, because the basics of advertising still exist. You still need to test creative, you need to test messaging, you need to iterate based on performance. Um, but you don't need to reinvent the wheel or spend weeks debating every visual element. So I think that's the
Yeah.
direction I'm going. Okay. But actually, one more thing before we get into Q&A, we are going to launch a quick poll. Julia and team, if you wouldn't mind launching that, we'd love if you just took like 2 to 5 seconds to answer that. And then with that, Julia, I think we can move into Q&A.
All right, great. Thank you guys. That was a really engaging discussion. It was very interesting to listen to. So thank you guys for that great discussion. So now, like Rebecca said, we have some time for questions. And just a quick reminder for everyone listening, you can submit questions by clicking the Q&A icon on the webinar platform. And when submitting a question, please include your name and email so our panelists can reach out to you if they're unable to answer your question during this time. So let's jump right in. Let's start with this question. Why are ads on CTV considered more engaging than other digital ads on other devices like laptops or mobile? And where are we in the cycle related to CTV?
So I think what makes CTV ads more engaging. Number one, like bigger screen, right? Generally you're talking about a TV. A bigger screen on a wall. Two is CTV is basically unskippable versus like most, any ad in a scroll is can be scrolled past or swiped past. Um, or like ads on YouTube will always have like some click that allows you to skip them. So TV ads are generally unskippable, and I think also they are kind of part of the game of TV rather than like just pure friction. Like sports has breaks in it. TV has act breaks. Like commercials have sort of always sat in those, and I think folks are more, let's say, accustomed to them than they are in search and social, where it just feels like sludge.
One thing I thought was interesting about that question, was it specifically called out like laptops or mobile? I'm curious, like if who asked that question, it also means like watching one of your streaming platforms on a mobile device and like Bilo, what your thoughts are on how
Yeah,
that impacts like the engagement of that. Because my thought is like, on the big screen, like that's on a wall you mentioned, right? Like
sure.
you're probably there, right? Like you might be multitasking, like cooking dinner or whatever, but you're there, right? on your mobile device or your laptop. I don't know. My first thought is like I'm sitting on an airplane, which I'm probably engaged, right? But like I
For
might not
sure.
be. I might be like, I mean, probably not watching a show on a walk or whatever, but
Yeah. That I mean, I think that's totally fair. Like, I think, and for it also depends, I think, a lot on your outcome. Like, if you are, if your brand is a mobile app, then it might make a lot more sense to do your like to advertise in CTV that is running strictly on mobile, right? So this is where some of the automated optimization and like contextualization I think makes a lot of sense. And so I shouldn't like talk out of turn about, like it could totally work for you. Yeah, it could totally work for you. I think it depends a lot on the outcome that you're trying to drive, and like you should think, is this a thing that people are going to, is this a thing that people are going to buy, like that the purchase where the purchase happens is the mobile device, then advertising on mobile is going to make a lot more sense. As far as like advertising on a laptop, again, it just like, my laptop takes up probably about as much visual area that I'm sitting in front of, like takes up about as much visual area as like my TV does sitting whatever 10 feet away from it or 12 feet away from it. So I think it is more about like how much of like my attention is focused there. Or like, yeah, how much of my attention is or can be focused there. And I think that is likely, regardless of whether you're reaching somebody watching Hulu on their laptop or Hulu on their TV, um, because the content is premium, people are going to want to pay attention to it.
Great. Yeah, that all makes sense. All right. So the next question we've got is, what's the minimum spend for CTV advertising?
What I would say is focus on a minimum number of outcomes rather than a minimum spend. I know there are advertisers on our platform spending like single digit thousands of dollars on their campaigns. It is like what I would say is you want to be able to run a campaign that is going to generate, basically like hundreds to thousands of outcomes depending on like what your target outcome is. And so if you're selling something where the advertising cost is like in the hundreds of dollars, I probably wouldn't recommend running an ad campaign that is under $50,000 to start with, or something like that. If you have like on the other hand a mobile app where your customer acquisition cost might be in the single digit dollars, I think single digit thousands of dollars for an ad campaign totally makes sense.
Great. Really good points. I like the idea of focusing on outcomes as opposed to spend, because every business is different, every marketer is different,
Yeah,
especially in an industry like marketing, it's so situational from
totally.
one thing to the next.
Totally. And the reason I talk about that is just for there are good statistical reasons to want to have hundreds of outcomes. That is where you start to be able to have confidence that optimization is improving your campaign versus your baseline. And generally you're going to want to have like 100 outcomes at least anytime that you're running some type of experiment. And generating thousands of outcomes means you can run that 100 sized experiment 5 times, 10 times, 20 times before you decide, oh, this is working really well for me, or like, hey, I've got to pull the plug.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So next question. Can we geo-target around key regions like Michigan manufacturing hubs, major airports, and border crossing zones?
Yeah, so you can define geo-targeting. Let's see. You can certainly define geo-targeting at the zip code level. I think you can definitely define geo-targeting at the zip code level. I don't believe we offer today like let's say more precise geo-targeting. Like I want a 50-meter radius around like around a particular building. Obviously there are like privacy concerns that come along with that as well. So I think like at the zip code level, that is targeting that exists today. I think for anything more like lat long based targeting, I think that is more it's more precise than there are more privacy issues that are associated with it. Yeah.
Great. And then I know this is a really big topic among like our readership right now. So I'm very interested to hear your answer to this question. Where do influencers fit in with CTV?
One of the things that I have seen, and this is something that like I haven't explored very much, and so I'm not sure whether this is effective, but this is the thing that I've definitely seen is the use of influencers, of like influencer marketing, or let's say snippets from influencer marketing in seeing those expanded out into CTV ads, or edited down, let's say, from, whatever, an influencer's like 2.5 minute makeup tutorial down into just the components of the CTV ad. Um, that might go closer to the production side than I know a lot about. I'm definitely very interested in whether that's effective or not. But I think if you have one of the things that we do know about TV advertising, and this has been proven over like, 80 years of TV, is that celebrity endorsements work. And so I believe based on that like bringing influencer marketing into, let's say, CTV ad creative likely will work the same way, but that's a thesis. That's not one that I've been able to test really well yet.
Yeah, I would add too, like the other thing we've been seeing more of is like just generally user-generated content, whether that's influencers or not. Um, and I think, influencers, celebrities, users, right? It all kind of brings like a different level of credibility. And that's why we're seeing a little bit more of that. What was I going to say? Oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. But yes, UGC, I think, is something we've been seeing a lot of and is getting bigger too.
Totally. All right, this is going to be our last question. So for a niche B2B industry like logistics and supply chain, where the audience is small and specialized, is
Yeah.
CTV even an effective channel, or does it tend to perform better for broader consumer markets?
So this is one that's really hard to measure, right? And I think this is where every marketing channel is going to have a challenge. Like you walk through an airport, and you see ads that are targeted at like the 15 CEOs or whatever who walk through that same airport. I think you can do the same sort of advertising, or like I would say, yeah, I know you can do that same sort of advertising with CTV. Like I never see an SAP ad anywhere but the airport, but I see them all the time when I'm traveling, and I know that they're spending a lot of money on that stuff because they're trying to reach a very, very small number of people. You can still do that with CTV. You've got to understand that like a lot of that marketing is waste, but in the same way that like all the, like all the manufacturing automation ads that I see in the airport are also marketing waste, right? So I don't think you're going to be able to run an effective CTV campaign to 100 people, and just reach those 100 people and spend, whatever, like spend literally like one CPM to reach those 100 people 10 times. I think that would be, you might as well just send them a letter, frankly. If you really want to reach those folks. That said, you can reach those folks and a much broader audience where, you might end up with marketing waste. But if you're really looking for, if you're looking for like manufacturing executives, that group just isn't that big. They might like you might be able to reach, you still may be able to reach them at home, but you're going to reach a bunch of other folks too. And I would say, from my perspective, this is not marketing waste. This is just sort of the cost of doing business. In the same way that like, manufacturing automation ads to me in the airport are like the cost of doing business to reach that manufacturing executive who walks through the airport, whatever, 15 times a year.
Absolutely. Um, all right. Well, thank you so much. We're out of time, so we're going to wrap here. So thank you again, Michael and Rebecca, for all your insights today. It was a really good conversation. And I'd like to thank everyone for listening and submitting questions. So yeah, have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.